Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a perfectly adequate show for you today. Niall, there has been entirely too much collegiality, cordiality, agreement between us this week. So I wrote a radar you're definitely not going to like to get us off fighting finally.
Well, I like to think that we have some things that we can have a spirited disagreement about, and this sounds like it's going to be one of them. So why don't you tell us what's in your radar?
Well, Senator Bernie Sanders returned to the Joe Rogan experience yesterday, and what an episode it was. Once upon a time, of course, Sanders was the preferred candidate of Joe Rogan. The podcasting giant gave the independent left Democrat his endorsement in 2020, endorsement that many mainstream liberals treated as a drawback at the time, which actually seems quite insane today. In fact, some members of the liberal media wanted Sanders to reject the Rogan endorsement and distance himself from Rogan due to Rogan's contrarian and independent-minded views on topics like the COVID pandemic, transgenderism, wokeness, and so on. Fast forward to 2025, and Democrats are desperate for their own liberal Joe Rogan, having now had to grapple with the fact that progressivism's knee-jerk rejection of every broadly popular figure who does not fit neatly into a box has left them friendless and at odds with the trajectory of American cultural life. So I'm not surprised that this time around there aren't any Democrats wagging their fingers at Bernie for going on Rogan. Could it be they'd like to learn from him? And look, I will say this, Sanders does maintain a certain appeal. He's still quite sharp. He was able to deftly converse with Rogan on a range of topics despite his advanced age. He's so much more cognitively capable than Joe Biden. It's frankly embarrassing that the Democratic Party didn't go with this option in 2020. That said, he made a number of arguments that, while perfectly well articulated and reasonable sounding, are, in my view, wrong. In fact, Rogan even called one of them out as Sanders was making it. Let's watch this early part of the interview, which focused on the power of billionaires to influence public policy with their dollars, something the progressive left is obsessed with. Here was Sanders attacking the Citizens United Supreme Court decision, which he thinks is pretty much the worst thing that ever happened to our country and the source of all of our problems.
What it says is, you're a billionaire. You have now the constitutional right, because your money is your freedom of expression, right? So you don't like Bernie Sanders? You can put millions or hundreds of millions of dollars into a campaign and express your view about how terrible Bernie Sanders is,
right,
and you can buy that election, right? That's
right.
Your constitutional right. I think that's probably the worst decision that the Supreme Court has ever made. So what is the result of that decision?
Let's set aside for the moment, but we'll come back to it. The obvious problem Sanders is complaining about, a Supreme Court decision that allows you to, well, use your free speech to criticize Bernie Sanders. To my mind, that's something that should obviously be permissible in a democracy. Here's the next part.
Elon Musk, and I know Elon was on your show, and he's here in Austin, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. And we could talk about Elon, but he spent $270 million to elect Trump as president. Okay. I think that's absurd that any one person...
What's the most someone donated towards the Harris campaign?
They spent a lot of money on Harris as well.
They spent $1.5 billion just
combined
over the course of a couple of months.
You got it. All right, let me talk about it. So
yeah,
I'm not here
let's
just to say it's
that.
a Republican. That's my point here.
Ding, ding, ding. Thank you, Joe Rogan, reminding viewers that it is not the case that one party received tons of money from wealthy people and the other does not. Both parties and their candidates are the recipients of huge sums of money. The reason for that is because the federal government has tremendous power to affect the bottom lines of wealthy people. That is why they spend so much. The feds get to decide whether to break Meta into a bunch of smaller companies. So of course Mark Zuckerberg is going to spend his money to stop that. The feds get to decide whether Amazon, the most efficient engine of meeting human need ever devised, gets hampered by costly regulation. You better believe Jeff Bezos is going to get involved in politics. It's true of Apple. It's true of Google. You bet it's true of Elon Musk. It's not just wealthy individuals, activist groups, teachers' unions spend millions of dollars to help elect Democrats because they think Democrats do a better job protecting their jobs, wages, and summer vacations. If you don't like how much money gets spent on politics, then the best solution, in my view, is to make politics matter less. If the government had less power, it wouldn't be worth spending so much to control it. But I want to go back to the first part of Sanders' answer and remind everybody watching, once again, that this is about not just money, but speech. Citizens United was a film company that made a documentary that was critical of then-candidate Hillary Clinton. The Federal Election Commission, the FEC, fined the filmmakers for daring to air TV advertisements for this film within 30 days of a primary election or 60 days from the general, which was contrary to the law. Think about that. The feds were saying they had the power to stop a filmmaker from buying ads to promote their documentary. Now, before the Supreme Court, attorneys for the FEC argued they could do the same to a book. In fact, they could stop you from publishing a book about a candidate who was too close to the election. That's what sold Associate Justice Anthony Kennedy, the court's swing voter at the time, that the law had to be struck down. Don't take my word for it. Here was Kennedy discussing the case years later.
The attorney for the government of the United States argued that if there was an upcoming political campaign, I forget maybe 6 weeks, and a book was being published or a movie being produced, and it was critical of a candidate, that you could stop publication. I thought it was unbelievable. This is a First Amendment right.
Now, I appreciate why political figures, members of Congress, and perhaps Bernie Sanders himself wouldn't want you to be able to publish a critical documentary or a film or advertise it on television. But it should be obvious to Rogan and viewers who correctly prize free speech that such a law would have and did violate their First Amendment rights. If we want to limit how much say wealthy people have over government policy, well, then we have to set limits on government policy, not on wealthy people, because limits on people apply to my free speech rights too, and your free speech rights as well. That's my rebuttal to Bernie Sanders.
Oh, Robby. Oh, dear.
Tell me why I'm wrong, Niall.
We'll certainly get off to a disagreement here. Look, I could quibble with some of the characterizations there of the Citizens United, the organization, and Citizens United, the decision. But I think where we differ on this question is actually a larger question, because to me it seems completely obvious that if you permit corporations, which Citizens United did, to spend unlimited amounts of money backing one candidate or hampering another, you are effectively drowning out the free speech of people who do not have those means. And so Sanders was right to acknowledge that this is not a one-party equation. Yes, Elon Musk spent almost $300 million. That's a vast sum of money. But there are people on the Democratic side who spend that amount of money too. Let me, to try to put a point on this argument, use a hypothetical where the money would be spent with a position I agree with. I have argued here in favor of gun control numerous times. Michael Bloomberg basically agrees with me on that. Michael Bloomberg can then spend 10 or 50 or $100 million arguing that position. That has the effect of drowning out lots of individual gun owners, people of more modest means who think otherwise. So it's not just this argument about basic free speech. It's about people's voices being drowned out by the super wealthy.
But I mean, I appreciate you applying the argument to an issue where you would take the
rich guy's side.
You would take the rich guy's position. I guess I philosophically don't agree with that, or I don't think that's something to be addressed. I mean, you and I, as virtues of being television hosts, have a somewhat unequal ability to project our speech versus someone commenting in the YouTube comments on the show. Mm-hmm. That's just the nature of reality. I mean, the New York Times does endorsements for candidates. They did a quasi-endorsement of Cuomo over Mamdani using their free speech rights to do so. Mm-hmm. That has tremendous power and influence. It matters more than Joe Smith on the streets endorsement. It's an unequal use of speech, but it is just, I guess it's not to me an improper use of speech. The New York Times Corporation can use its speech to advocate for whatever public policy, to advocate for specific candidates. Mm-hmm. We all accept, I mean, maybe there's some right-wing people who think that should be not allowed, but generally speaking, we say, well, yeah, that's free speech. I don't see how it's different if the company is Burger King or Bloomberg or whatever, using their speech to advocate for the things they want. They have more influence to do it. Maybe that's lamentable. And then of course, we don't have time to get into this. I also probably disagree with you on how much impact that can actually have in terms of the actual motivating of voters. Obviously, just drawing attention to something helps. Elon Musk, what he probably did best for Trump was turn his social media site, his speech platform, into a much more pro-Trump organization. Was that, even if we had stricter campaign finance laws, how could you have a law that stops him from using the platform he owned? That's a very speech focused thing, right?
Right, but I mean, that is obviously a speech platform.
I think these are hard to differentiate.
Well, I don't think they're that hard to differentiate, with all due respect, because I think when you're talking about spending money with the express purpose of electing a particular candidate in terms of advertising and so on and so forth,
it's what you're spending
that
on.
is different from actual free speech rights and, as I say, overwhelms the free speech rights of people who do not.
I guess if you were like giving it to somebody to change that, like, I'm giving you $200, now you have to vote for whoever, maybe. But again, the thing you're buying with the money is a billboard or an advertisement, or it's a speech thing.
Right, but the fact that rich people or interests don't carry every election, as Andrew Cuomo just found out, which we'll talk about in a second.
Can't wait to talk about that.
That does not mean that money doesn't give you an advantage. And if that advantage is rendered limitless by a lack of campaign finance restrictions, I think that's a problem. Coming up, President Trump is screaming fake news again, this time over CNN, and the New York Times is reporting on his administration's strikes in Iran. Stay with us.
President Trump is railing against CNN and the New York Times over their reporting on his administration strikes on Iran.
Both outlets ran stories on how early US intelligence suggests that the strikes were not as damaging as Trump had made them out to be.
The president wrote on Truth Social, "Fake news, CNN, together with the failing New York Times, have teamed up in an attempt to demean one of the most successful military strikes in history. The nuclear sites in Iran are completely destroyed. Both the Times and CNN are getting slammed by the public."
CNN writes in their piece that the Defense Intelligence Agency, and that's the Pentagon's intelligence arm, produced the assessment. It's based on a battle damage assessment by the US Central Command.
Here is Secretary of State Marco Rubio defending the US strike.
The conversion facility, which you can't do a nuclear weapon without a conversion facility. We can't even find where it is, where it used to be on the map. You can't even find where it used to be because the whole thing is just blackened out. It's gone.
Conservatives on X are pointing to the fact that the CNN story was written by former Politico reporter Natasha Bertrand. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt wrote, "This CNN story was written by the same reporter who wrote the very first fake news story claiming the Hunter Biden laptop was disinformation." How did that work out for you, Natasha Bertrand?
Meanwhile, Democrats are slamming Trump for postponing 2 briefings to Congress on the Iran strikes.
What are they afraid of? Why won't they engage Congress in the critical details? The results of the recent strike, the scope and trajectory of the conflict, the administration's long-term strategy.
The question that the American people are asking is, why are Republicans hiding facts and the truth from America with respect to the possibility that their actions will drive us into another catastrophic war in the Middle East?
Speaker Johnson announced that the House briefing would be held on Friday. So far, the ceasefire between Iran, Israel, and the U.S. is holding. So the reason I know that conservatives are skeptical of this reporting, Natasha Bertrand is in fact a reporter formerly with Politico. It is her byline under the infamous headline that I still can't believe all these years later they never updated or changed or said, whoopsies, that Hunter Biden laptop is disinfo, experts say. That,
Not to relitigate all of that, but was her story not more nuanced than the headline was, though?
the story was more nuanced. They've done her no favors by leaving that headline on it for so long. Right. You're right that it is not always the author's fault that what the headline says. So that is why there is some skepticism of her. Now, this reporting was also from the New York Times, so there are multiple sources on it. We don't really know the basis of that report, and we should find out more about whose intelligence this is, because it is something we just deserve to know the answers to, correct?
Well, when you say we don't know the basis of it, no one appears to be disputing that it comes from the Defense Intelligence Agency, which is a part of the Pentagon, which is self-evidently part of the Trump administration. The thing that is notable to me about the comments that we played or read from Leavitt and Rubio was they did not say the report was false. They made, I mean, in Levitt's case, she made a personal attack on Natasha. In Rubio's case, he said, oh, well, there's this other facility that looks like it's completely destroyed. The reporting, the substance of the reporting was that after all these strikes and Trump's contention that it had completely obliterated Iran's enrichment program, that it had in fact delayed the progress of that program by about 6 months. Now, if that is true, what it means is that Trump has taken an enormous risk, sending US warplanes basically at the prodding of Benjamin Netanyahu to bomb Iran, and has slightly delayed the uranium enrichment program. That seems like something that is vital for the public to know. If there is evidence to the contrary, let's see it. But I think it's certainly a legitimate story and a worrying story.
I think it's a legitimate story, although the last thing I would want to do is convince the administration that the
go back
mission
and bomb
is not
them.
accomplished and
Right.
we need to send in some more bombers to really take care of it. It goes to say how much of the capabilities to develop weapons of this nature can really be bombed away at all. Some of this is just is information. You have to, if the people were in the underground complex and they got killed, can they find new people? Is some of this, in computers, the formula for crafting a nuclear weapon they emailed it to themselves. It can't be blown up. That kind of thing.
Sorry to cut across you, but some of the reporting was to the effect that the Fordo site, which is the one that's built inside the mountain, that the entrance and some of the basic infrastructure had been damaged, but the thing itself, the underground facility, had not been destroyed, and therefore they could presumably rebuild the entrance tunnels, and there you go.
My suspicion is in Trump's inner circle, or in Trump's own, his most inner of inner circles, his own brain. His thinking is, again, this is just my guess, my hunch, he still wants some kind of deal with the Iranians, a peace deal, and this was more about showing them that he means business, that if he doesn't like the direction of the conversation or he doesn't think they're playing ball, he will launch some bombs at them. It's less about actually permanently degrading their military nuclear capabilities, because that's kind of a fool's errand anyway, and they could eventually get a nuclear weapon. What are they going to do with it? It is more negotiating strategy. That is what I suspect his actual thinking is. But I don't know.
That may be his thinking, but the other facet of his thinking that we have to remind ourselves of is there was a deal with Iran about its enrichment program. It stood until Trump tore it down because he doesn't like things with Obama's name on it, essentially. While that deal was in place, it was very effective. Since the withdrawal from that deal, that is when Iran has apparently accelerated this enrichment. And so Trump's kind of ego and chaos is just causing all this rumpus to leave us trying to get back to square one.
Yeah, I was not in favor of withdrawing from the deal, nor was Rand Paul, the political figure with whom I agree the most. So no argument there, but we should get back to something resembling it, or Trump says he can get something even better. That remains to be seen, and this might be a part of trying to achieve that. I hope it's that rather than a just prelude to more military strikes, which I'm sure some people, both in the administration and outside it in both parties, are hoping that we have full-on regime change, which that does not seem to be on the table so much for now. I think that would be a good thing.
With that. Yeah.
Trump retaliates against AOC up next, calling her one of the dumbest people in Congress after she floats the idea of impeaching the president yet again.
Stupid AOC, one of the dumbest people in Congress. Those are the words that President Trump aimed at New York Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. AOC had floated the idea of Trump's impeachment because he didn't seek congressional approval before the U.S. bombed Iran.
Trump went on a wild rant on Truth Social against the Democrats, including two non-white congresswomen, Jasmine Crockett and Ilhan Omar. He wrote in part, "Stupid AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, one of the dumbest people in Congress, is now calling for my impeachment, despite the fact that the crooked and corrupt Democrats have already done that twice before. When we examine her test scores, we will find out she is not qualified for office, but nevertheless far more qualified than Crockett, who is a seriously low IQ individual, or Ilhan Omar, who does nothing but complain about our country." Trump also mentioned Sleepy Joe, Kamala, in the auto pen, his long post, and also mocked Schumer, calling him great Palestinian senator crying Chuck Schumer.
AOC fired back at Trump, writing on X, "Mr. President, don't take your anger out on me. I'm just a silly girl. Take it out on whoever convinced you to betray the American people and our Constitution by illegally bombing Iran and dragging us into war. It only took you 5 months to break almost every promise you made." Other Democrats also came on board with the impeachment push. Representative Al Green filed an article of impeachment against Trump. Here he is speaking on the House floor.
I do it because no one person should have the power to take over 300 million people to war without consulting with the Congress of the United States of America. I do this because if I do not, this authoritarian president that we currently have will continue to assume power. He has already instigated an assault on the citadel of democracy.
I mean, look, of all the things to complain about that Trump is doing that they're saying are unconstitutional or worthy of impeachment, I'll be honest, this is the one where I am most concede the point. I have said many times on this show, I think this strike on Iran is akin to an act of war and needed to be debated, discussed, and voted on by Congress. I feel that way about what led to the overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi in Libya under Obama. I was complaining about it then. This is the exact same thing or very similar thing, so I have to be consistent and complain about it and have. Yeah. I believe this power is one that rests with Congress, and I am happy to hear Democrats and some Republicans like Thomas Massie and the most progressive members and most far-right members coming together and saying, actually, this is a responsibility for Congress. It's not really about Trump specifically. He is far from the first president to abuse this power. This is it's become part and parcel, unfortunately, for the presidency to just exert the ability to do war at his own discretion. I think that's bad. I think that's not what our founders intended at all, very obviously. There needs to be a new justification for these efforts. I don't think you can just chalk it up to the generic war on terror justification. So, fair enough. What else can I say? This is not one where I'm going to go, I mean, there is clearly not enough political support to do it, and nor was there at any time in the past, so it's not going to go anywhere. But I would love for Congress to reassert their right to be consulted at the very least. I mean, they're supposed to be the decision makers here. So what else can I say?
I applaud your consistency and for calling out a Republican president who you would certainly have at least more in common with than you would have with Biden or Obama for traducing the War Powers Act, which I think we both agree it does pretty clearly. So, clearly there has been a potential breach of that. I agree with you that the electoral or political merits of doing it seem pretty limited to me. I think you can make the abstract argument. I'm not at all sure that it would help Democrats win any elections to pursue him for impeachment.
It's also just kind of boy who cried wolf. I know that Democrats believe the others had firm rationalizations. Yeah. I have a little bit of skepticism of the first one. The second one is perfectly proper. Sure. If they'd not done any of those, then you could really go, well, this is the bridge too far. And you have me agreeing with you, yes, this is much more clearly a constitutional problem, but they've already done it a bunch of times. It didn't work. So what else can you do?
Before we leave this topic, let me make a defense of AOC, as I am prone to do.
Well, I don't think stupid.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
And since Trump raises the issue, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, famously born in the Bronx and raised in Westchester, went to Boston University, double majored in economics and international relations, graduated with honors. Donald Trump, his entry into Wharton at Penn was partly facilitated by his family. His brother called the admissions office. He graduated without honors, or at least he's not on the honors list. And Michael Cohen, when he was loyal to Trump, famously threatened people if they were to release Trump's transcript from Wharton. So if we're going to get into a brain measuring contest, I think that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez would prevail over Donald Trump.
I think they are both perfectly intelligent people. And
he started it.
And I like with, Bernie, who I just did my whole opening radar on. I think he's perfectly intelligent. Yeah. Obviously, he's a smart man. I just disagree with him. I feel the same way about AOC. I don't think she's dumb. I just disagree with her. And a little bit of the the she's dumb thing is kind of cringe and boomer to me now. Well, right-wing websites made a lot because she's a fun person to.
Sure.
I mean, she's a telegenic person herself, so you get a lot of headlines with her name in it, draw you a lot of web traffic. So there's a lot of harping on her for that reason. I very much disagree with her, as I very much disagree with Bernie Sanders. I don't think she's dumb. I would not say.
No, and I also think that is adjacent to the argument that one often sees about her online. Oh, she's just a bartender, which coming from a party, the Republican Party, that these days espouses it as being more in touch with the grassroots of the population. I find
well, fair enough, but don't you think she tried to? We have no time for this, but she, portrayed herself as just a bartender. I thought that was messaging on her part, and then she actually. I know they had wealth. She was educated, and then I think they lost their wealth because of her
father died.
Her father died, right, and then she ended up. So I understand the story, but that seemed like a conscious choice on her part to me.
Zohran Mamdani stuns in an upset win over Andrew Cuomo in the New York City Democratic mayoral primary. We'll have more next.
Friends, we have done it.
In a stunning upset, Zohran Mamdani defeated former Governor Andrew Cuomo in the Democratic primary for New York City mayor on Tuesday. Mamdani invoked Nelson Mandela in his victory speech. Here's some more of that.
Tonight, we made history. In the words of Nelson Mandela, it always seems impossible until it is done. An hour ago, I spoke with Andrew Cuomo about the need to bring this city together, as he called me to concede the race.
Speaking from his campaign headquarters, Cuomo congratulated his opponent and applauded him. Take a look at that.
Tonight was not our night. Tonight was Assemblyman Mamdani's night, and he put together a great campaign, and he touched young people and inspired them and moved them and got them to come out and vote.
Virtually unknown at the outset of the race, 33-year-old Mamdani surged in recent weeks, running an ultra-progressive campaign centred on managing the cost of living. He surpassed Cuomo, who had at one point been leading by double digits in the polls. Ultimately, even Cuomo had to acknowledge that the sizable lead the Democratic Socialists built on Election Day couldn't be overtaken in later rounds of New York's ranked choice system.
Mamdani will go on to run in the mayoral general election in November. Sitting New York City Mayor Eric Adams was not in the Democratic primary. He will run as an independent in November. Cuomo signaled he has some decisions to make, but still has the option of running in the general. So this is possibly not the last word. Well, it's literally not the last word because there will be a general election. Whether Cuomo enters it is an open question at this point. Cuomo has said he's going to think about it. So we shall see. Even if he does enter, I think Mamdani would probably be the favorite at this point, although it does get a little bit complicated if there's both Eric Adams and Cuomo and this Curtis Sliwa fellow. So we'll see. But for now, big win for Mamdani. I think it's not actually particularly surprising. We described it as a shock, as an upset. But Mamdani is a charismatic figure who campaigned very hard and is likable. I do not want his policies for New York City, but oh well. Versus Cuomo, who resigned in disgrace as governor within living memory. This was like 50 years ago or something, as a result of both sexual misconduct and a really, really, really awful scandal where he tried to cover up, disguise how many people had died as a result of his COVID nursing homes policy. He also didn't campaign very energetically, for what it's worth, according to all reports. So this really shouldn't be a surprise. And, I think a lot of people are going to be saying, even people who, like myself, do not want many of Mamdani's policies, they're going to be saying, well, this is what the Democratic establishment gets for backing this really, really bad horse.
Yeah. So I think that, for all our ideological differences, we share a distaste for Andrew Cuomo, I think. And I think that kind of is reflected more broadly in these results where Mamdani has beaten him actually fairly comfortably, coming from nowhere and was, had much less money behind him and all that. Before we get into the politics that Mamdani espouses, I do have to say that it is on a non-partisan or non-ideological basis, it is one of the joys in politics when a front-runner of with money behind him and who's, frankly, in my opinion, fairly politically cynical and is the kind of machine politician gets beaten by the upstart. And so I think a lot of people, you know, whether they agree with everything Mamdani advocates or not, were shedding no tears for Andrew Cuomo. Let's put it that way. Now, in relation to Mamdani, what I found interesting about the campaign was the scare tactics, as I would view them, against a left-wing candidate didn't actually work. They didn't work in terms of his social and economic policies, free buses, government-run grocery store. I know an idea that you're a big fan of in every borough, but they also didn't work on the Palestine question, where I think he was smeared as anti-Semitic or toxic in some way, when in fact he was putting forth a broadly pro-Palestinian position, which I think a lot of people, certainly in the Democratic base, certainly among younger voters in the Democratic base, share.
I thought his comments on, so some of the knocks on him I thought were unfair on that question. I thought his comments on the phrase globalize the intifada were not good. I also think he's running to be mayor of New York City, not like to coordinate the foreign policy of the United States. So that really wouldn't be a reason not to vote for him from my point of view.
Right, although Cuomo tried to make it a reason not
very
to vote
much
for him.
so.
Yeah.
I've tried to make it about foreign policy instead of the lived experiences of people in New York and the needs that they have. The demographics are very interesting, by the way. Mamdani did better with white people and Hispanic. Cuomo did massively better with black people. He also did better with, this is according to New York Times data, with lower income people. So the free grocery store idea is maybe preferred by the affluent. Mamdani won middle income and higher income people by 10 and 13 points. Cuomo won lower income people by 13 points. Very interesting.
No, it is. I mean, all those factors are interesting, but I see you have the map, which of course we can't show on screen there, but Mamdani carried, an enormous number of areas throughout the city there. Even Staten Island, I think, which is typically the most centrist borough by far. I think Mamdani did prevail, not in Staten Island overall, but in some precincts within it. And so I think he did have a much broader appeal than people thought. Now, you can argue about the extent to which that's an anti-Cuomo vote or a pro-Mamdani vote, but the result itself speaks for itself.
It does. I wonder how this will make people feel about ranked choice voting. I think Democratic establishment types or moderate liberal people are going to hate ranked choice voting even more as this results from their perception that this allowed, Mamdani to kind of sneak through. I'm not sure that's actually true statistically based on what happened, but it maybe validates those of us on both the right and the left who wish it wasn't always just a binary choice between some awful candidate and then someone who is ideologically unacceptable, so you have to vote for the awful candidate. I am open-minded, but I seem to like ranked choice voting, I think.
No, I mean, some people on the left like ranked choice voting because it blunts the argument that you're wasting your vote by voting for someone more fringy. If you do so and that person gets eliminated in early round, your second preference and third preference and so on can actually make a difference.
I'm going to be looking to see if Cuomo and Eric Adams have some kind of discussion or cut some kind of deal.
Cuomo-Adams pact.
That's going to be interesting. Unacceptable, next up. That's how some Republicans are describing Trump's latest appellate court nominee, why MAGA is split on Emil Beauvais.
President Trump wants to give his personal attack dog at DOJ a lifetime judicial appointment. His name is Emil Beauvais, Trump's former criminal defense attorney.
Beauvais asked us to base a prosecutorial decision not on the facts, not on the law, but on a political calculation.
Beauvais cannot be trusted to be impartial on the Court of Appeals.
Emil Beauvais III, you may recognize him from being at Trump's side during the now infamous Stormy Daniels hush money trial. Well, now he's Trump's nominee for the Third Circuit Court of Appeals and apparent judicial bogeyman.
That video we just played from the Justice Connection is just one of many voices from both sides of the aisle warning senators to vote against Beauvais' confirmation. The reason? Alleged legal and ethical misconduct. Those two former DOJ lawyers we saw earlier allege Beauvais was behind the quid pro quo deal between New York City Mayor Eric Adams and the Trump administration to drop the corruption investigation into Adams. They also allege that he, Bove, was the one who ordered the list of January the 6th investigators be made and was the one who later fired several J6 prosecutors.
And then there's the bombshell report from the New York Times this week that outlines how Bove was allegedly willing to ignore court orders to further President Trump's mass deportation campaign. The report relies on a DOJ whistleblower by the name of Erez Ruveni, who says he was fired after questioning the Salvadorian deportation flights earlier this year. Ruveni says as that legal battle was playing out, Bove insisted that, quote, the planes needed to take off no matter what, and said the DOJ would need to consider telling the courts F you and ignoring any order that would halt the deportations before they could take place.
In response to Bove's nomination, Democrats are raising the alarm. Senator Cory Booker posted to X, Emile Bove has no respect for the rule of law and court orders. He does not belong on the federal bench. And his colleague from California, Senator Adam Schiff, says the nomination to the federal judiciary is just the first step.
Why is Donald Trump looking to him now in the Court of Appeals? He wants someone who will unquestionably and without concern for the morality or immorality, the ethics or lack of ethics, the lawfulness or the lawlessness, will do and order and opine the way Donald Trump wants. He wants just a complete and utter sycophant like Emile Bove on the Supreme Court.
Meanwhile, some conservatives do oppose this nomination, including Greg Nunziata, the executive director for the Society for the Rule of Law, calling Bove unacceptable and sending a letter to the Senate Judiciary Committee urging them to reject him. Nunziata writes that Bove's record is, quote, deeply incompatible with a lifetime appointment to the circuit judgeship, but Mike Davis with the Article 3 Project insists his resume makes him qualified. Take a listen to what he had to say on Steve Bannon's War Room podcast.
The FedSoc types like Ed Whalen wailing about Emile Bove, saying somehow that Emile Bove is not good enough. He graduated at the top of his class at Georgetown Law School. He was a federal prosecutor in the Southern District of New York, the premier federal district in the country. He was a national security prosecutor. He was the acting deputy attorney general, the acting number 2 at the Justice Department, and he was President Trump's lawyer.
So look, I think that it's easy to get lost in the sort of weeds here where people are talking about Emile Bove's academic qualifications or Mike Davis disparaging FedSoc.
We were talking about academic qualifications in just the other segment, Niall.
Yes, well, I mean, we can talk about his qualifications if you like. I don't think he's unqualified in terms of his academic record, but that's not really the argument. The argument, particularly in the New York Times piece, does go to the idea of him conspiring in lawlessness, allegedly. And it comes from this whistleblower, Erez Ruveni, who had worked in the Justice Department for a long time and notes that he, Ruveni, had previously defended some of the more controversial elements of Trump's migration policies. And I think the key point here, Robby, it seems to me, is this meeting that Ruveni outlines, where Trump is about to invoke the Alien Enemies Act. That's very controversial. The idea is that as soon as he does so, there are going to be these flights to El Salvador carrying illegal migrants. Mm-hmm. Now, what then happens, according to Ruveni, is he raises the issue, Ruveni does, well, what happens if a judge steps in? And Bove, in very profane terms, says, well, it basically doesn't matter, we'll ignore them.
According to this person.
According to this person. Now, this person says that there are many other people in the room. We shall see what they have to say about it. But if that is true, if that is borne out, then obviously that is not the conduct of someone who is fit to be a circuit court judge.
Mm. Yeah, I'm looking for what, because I have not followed this particularly closely, what Republicans say in response, and it's mostly, I mean, I don't actually think there's much Republican nomination to him. We read the quotes by this Greg Nunziata figure, who's, I see running for the Bulwark, so, you know, make of that
Trump
what you,
critical,
Trump
skeptical.
Yeah. What I am seeing is conservative MAGA world people putting pressure, tweeting any Republican who doesn't vote for this to confirm this guy is going to face our wrath. Kind of a Pete Hegseth situation again when Iowa Senator Joni Ernst was uncertain and somebody else was uncertain too. facing the pressure to do it. So that's really what's happening here. I mean, I think that they should do what judges say, obviously. It's not a good policy to tell the administration to ignore what judges say, because that sets you up for obvious confrontation that you don't want in terms of just being the wrong thing to do. So if he did do that, that was wrong, but I have no doubt Republicans will fall in line to support him.
Yeah, but I don't think it's purely about the politics or what the party line vote is.
Certainly not that he used the F word.
No,
matter.
No, right. But the point is that we see and hear people like Stephen Miller, as well as Trump, but particularly Stephen Miller, constantly talking about judicial coups and language like this, plainly setting the groundwork to ignore court orders. That is illegal, and it is setting up a situation where the president and his allies are going to claim the right to act illegally. Now, if Émile Beauvais is part of that effort in relation to the Alien Enemies Act or anything else, that's obviously a major problem. And I think there is a really substantive issue here. Now, of course, Beauvais has the right to offer contrary evidence or say why he didn't claim that he didn't say the things of which he is being accused. But if he did do so, then that's someone who shouldn't be in any high office at all, in my opinion.
All right, next up is Lisa Murkowski switching parties and becoming a Democrat. We will discuss after this.
Could the Democratic Party get one more member? Making the switch seems to be on the mind of Republican Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski, according to an exclusive Semaphore article. Murkowski also spoke about the change during an appearance on GD Politics with Galen Druk. Let's watch.
You have a greater likelihood of being elected if you are not viewed as just the holy partisan, but you're liked by you're supported by a group over here. Plus, there's a lot of folks that really like you as your number two. There is some openness to exploring something different than the status quo.
Murkowski is considered one of the more moderate Republicans in the Senate. She says she sees just as many major problems with the Democratic Party as the Republican Party. That's not a shocker. Social media users are split on her comments. Conservative political commentator Rogan O'Handley, better known as DC Drano, says Lisa Murkowski is a Democrat. The worst thing you could say.
Democrat. Certainly is if you're DC Drano. But anyway, Democrat and podcast host Tara Dublin writes, "Come through, Lisa Murkowski. Democrats welcome everyone, especially those who understand the importance of putting country ahead of party and that supporting a dictator over our democracy is bad."
I mean, the thing with Lisa Murkowski, like Susan Collins, yes, very, very moderate, independent-minded Republican. With Susan Collins in Maine, that's the best the Republican Party is ever going to do, so why would they want to chase her from the party? I think, Alaska is a more conservative state than Maine, so maybe they think they could do better. Of course, they tried to do better. What was his name? Joe Miller?
Joe Miller.
And then she ran a write-in campaign and won that, which is that's a spike in the football thing to do. That is an amazing achievement that doesn't happen a lot. So you come for the king, you best not miss. I don't think Republicans, I don't think anyone actually serious, DC Drano's not a serious person, wants to chase her from the party despite her, occasional independence. I appreciate that she's independent. I like independent-minded people. She's often independent in a way that, Thomas Massie is independent in a way that I like and agree with. Rand Paul is. Lisa Murkowski isn't really independent-minded in like a weird libertarian direction. She's independent-minded in I am kind of personally offended by Trump's behavior sort of way, which is fine. It just doesn't get you anywhere, but,
Yeah, she's not a particularly heterodox figure. She's just a moderate Republican.
Yeah.
And that's fine, and I think there's a certainly, obviously that's a completely valid ideological affiliation to hold. The thing about her becoming a Democrat is twofold. One is she would certainly not be reelected in Alaska as a Democrat because it's tilted so Republican. But then the second thing is I don't really think she believes in democratic things for the most part. I mean, she's, I guess, fairly pro-choice on the abortion question, but she's a sort of old school, keep taxes low, encourage personal enterprise and personal responsibility.
Those are the things I do like about her.
Yeah, no, I mean, and they're like there's just the standard kind of ideological divisions in a way. I think she seems an honourable person. I think she seems a fairly temperate person at a time when loud and angry voices are proliferating, and I think that's nice. But I would be surprised to see her become a Democrat.
I saw her on the street once.
Did you?
I knew it was her because she just has a very striking presence.
Ah, excellent. Was she charismatic as she wandered down the street?
She was.
One of the only few people I have seen there, I saw Doug Emhoff fairly recently in a coffee shop, but I won't reveal where it is in case people have bad intent, but he was sipping his coffee.
Yeah,
Not the first gentleman after all.
I've seen a large number of them on well, I used to live right on Capitol Hill, and now I live in a neighborhood that is not explicitly Capitol Hill, but is nearby. So I used to see a lot of Amy Klobuchar, and I saw Bernie Sanders running down the street once. I believe I saw Mitt Romney.
Klobuchar wasn't eating her salad with a comb at the time, I hope.
I won't give more details about where that was, because I think she still lives in the area. But
good.
I think I know what her lunch order is.
Well, that's a very intimate level of knowledge of the senator from Minnesota.
Well, that does it for us today. Oh, no, it doesn't. We're a little early, aren't we?
We are.
We're looking at our
like my suit?
We need another minute of commentary. Yes, your suit is one of my favorites, Niall. It reminds me of the movie The Wedding Singer.
Well,
have you seen that movie?
I have not, actually. That sounds suspiciously like a double-edged compliment. But I like to wear this every so often just to entertain our viewing public and our colleagues in the newsroom.
We have an announcement for tomorrow. We will
excellent.
be interviewing Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. I am so delighted we'll get to talk to her about what's going on in the MAGA faction with Iran, her having spoken up like Thomas Massey about some of the constitutional questions and about whether we want to get involved in conflict there. So I'm really delighted for that. And then tomorrow will be my last day on the clock for a while because I'm going on vacation next week.
Suave breaks. Suave vacations.
I take like one vacation a year, and something always goes wrong, but I hope that won't be the case this time. I will be enjoying the island of Sicily in the Mediterranean.
Beautiful. Well, I will be back with you tomorrow, and look forward to that for sure.
Indeed. That does it for us today on Rising Live. Look out for more exclusive YouTube content coming your way today, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel so you never miss any content. And, of course, for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we are now available anywhere you can listen to podcasts, and we can't wait to see you back here tomorrow for more discussion, debate, and more colorful suits from Niall. See you then.